Do you know many words in English, but every time you have to speak English, you can't remember them? Watch this video and learn why you know so many words, but every time you have to use them in conversations, you can't remember them. Coming up. Hey friends, Teacher Prix here to help you talk to anyone, anywhere, anytime in English. First of all, thank you so much for joining me on another English lesson. If it's your first time here, welcome. I hope you enjoyed this lesson. I hope this lesson is useful to you and that you can get these ideas and improve your English. Anyway, my friends, today we're going to talk about possible reasons why you know so many words, but you can't really use them, okay? And this happens to many English learners, okay? You're not alone. Don't worry about it. This happens to many students. Without further ado, let's dive into reason number one. Maybe this happens to you. Maybe you learn translations of words, not explanations of words. And because of that, your brain may not be truly comfortable with the new word. So it's a false sensation of learning a new word. In reality, in the real world, you didn't really learn that word because your learning process was not appropriate. You learned a translation, but you never really learned how to use that word in English. And learning to use that word in English involves understanding that word in English, okay? And I will always defend this aspect of the language, depending on the level you are. One thing that I always do with my students, even beginners, okay? Because if you're thinking, oh, but it's impossible for a very basic student to learn everything in English. Well, there are different things you can do. What I do with my private students who are 100% beginners, have no English knowledge, have never studied English is, I explain the words rather than translate them. So if they don't know the word house, I don't immediately translate house to them. I explain house to them. And why do I do this? I'm teaching them to use this strategy. So by the time they are learning more English and I can speak more English to them, I do the same thing but in English. So by the time they are, pre-intermediate or intermediate students, when I need to explain a word to them, I do the same process. So I am teaching them to follow the explanation process, a contextualized learning. If you spend way too much time worrying about what that word means in your language, you're not connecting that word with English. You're not creating and establishing a connection with the language. So unfortunately, even though you may have Googled that word, you may not really use it because your brain is not fully comfortable with that new word you just learned. Okay? The second reason why you probably know many words but can't really use them in conversations, you can't really remember them, is you probably learn words out of context, okay? In the previous reason, I mentioned the importance of contextualized learning. So when I explain something to someone, I always give examples and examples in contextualized situations. So remember those English lists of words and their translations that you believe you know because it's a list. You have the word and the translation and the word, you know those words, you remember those words. Well, unfortunately, those lists and those individual words don't really help you use them. And why? They're out of context. So every time you write down a new word and you Google the translation, unfortunately, and you just write the word and the translation, well, it is very difficult for your brain to fully understand it because there's no context. I believe that if you want to be more productive with the words you study, with the vocabulary you study, you should begin focusing on spending some time creating context, putting putting those words in a context so that it's easier for your brain to remember. You really need to go through a memorization process, and just writing down words and reading them aloud will not really help you remember them. So context, okay? So I believe the way you study vocabulary is the problem. And I have other videos here on my channel where I give tips on how you can study vocabulary, so make sure to check them out. I will leave some links up here, I think. So check them out, okay? And hey, if you're enjoying this video, I ask you to share this lesson with your friends on social media and also subscribe. You know, YouTube tells me, based on the reports YouTube sends to me, that more than 50% who watch my lessons, share my lessons, are not subscribed. So make sure to hit this button here, this red button, and subscribe to the channel and become part of this beautiful community of more than 130 subscribers or something. So I would really appreciate that. And now to reason number 3. You don't put these words to use, and your review process is not on point. I believe that after watching this video, you definitely need to watch my other vocabulary videos, because if you can't remember them, I have 2 possibilities here, okay? Emotional intelligence, and I think I have some videos where I talk about the importance of emotional intelligence in the learning process. And if that's not your problem, which I highly doubt, I think each one of us has a little bit of problems to control emotions, to manage emotions when speaking another language. But hey, let's suppose that's not your case. The second case could be connected to not using those words, not consistently trying to use those words, and not reviewing those words, okay? There was something that I was doing, as I told you guys, I'm studying Italian. And I watch 1 episode of Friends per week, so I repeat the same episode 5-6 times a week. And at the beginning, I decided to write down words that I learned in Friends. But then, after 2 months, more or less, I realized that it was not working. I was not really remembering stuff. Why? Because I was just writing down the words. I wrote explanations in Italian, I wrote examples in Italian, okay, I was following my tip, but I was not reviewing them. I was not trying to use them. Well, the words I tried to use, I remembered, okay, so the words I actually used, that I actually forced myself to use, I remembered, but with pretty much, I think with 90% of those lists, I didn't put much work into learning them. I didn't put much effort into remembering, into reviewing those words and trying to find situations, different situations, recording myself using those words, practicing those words. Consequently, I stopped doing that kind of practice because I realized it was not being productive. I still take notes on words I learn, but now much less frequently, okay? It has to be something really interesting to make me stop, take notes, and then during the week establish a review process, recording myself speaking and using that word, or writing down, practicing in writing. Because if you don't practice, if you don't use that word, if you don't put in effort, you're not going to remember, okay? So I think that you need to review your study and review process, okay? With every new information, you need to have a repetition and review process established. Otherwise, you're not really going to learn and remember those words, those lists of words when you have a conversation with someone, okay? Other than that, my friends, does that make sense to you? Let me know what you think of this video here in the comments. I would love to hear from you, well, to read from you. Other than that, thank you so much, and I'll see you next time. Bye!